YouTube, I'm gonna be honest with you. Before tonight, I didn't even know who IDubbbz was. In fact, I thought he was Leafy, and if you asked me who Leafy was, I couldn't tell you either. But I had seen this video he posted going viral across the internet with a ton of people on Twitter complaining. Some supporting, and some saying that it's unacceptable what he's done. But in order for me to have a take on this drama, I needed to learn about it. So I brought in my editor, Stanz, to teach me a little bit. Give me some context behind IDubbbz so I could watch this video.
There were a ton of people that used to watch IDubbbz, and he had a series called Content Cop.
I have heard of that, to be clear. I've never seen it, but I think I understand that he would, like, go after the bad guys on YouTube.
100%. He did one specifically on Tana Mojo. She had a clip back in the day of her saying the N-word.
Ooh.
And IDubbbz met her and used the N-word to her face to try and throw her off for her previously using it, and then did a whole entire video doing like a deep dive on basically how either all of it's okay or none of it's okay.
Oh. And then, while watching the video, I started to hear that Charlie had a take on it. And unfortunately, people weren't happy. I started watching Charlie's video, and in the middle of that video, Charlie released another video. So this is a crazy, wild ride. I learn about IDubbbz, I watch his apology, I watch Charlie's video, and then I watch Charlie's follow-up video, and the whole time, I do what I do best. Only Stanz. I give my takes and try and talk about this with some human understanding. This is going to be a wild one. Let's get right into it.
For a while, I felt like if I changed my content over time, that people would see that as a reflection of who I am. I'm starting to realize that that is a very weak and passive way to, run my channel. If I'm gonna have the balls to go to Tana's fan meetup and say slurs at her and then make a video about how it's okay to say slurs, I think I should have...
He's just getting right out with it, huh?
...the balls to make an apology video and take accountability for the mistakes I've made. So that's what this video is. I am responsible.
I'm gonna say we're only 1 minute in, and this fucking rules so far. Am I smoking weed? I don't know anything about him, but I like the framing of this, and I like the thought process. I like the whole let there be no mistake. Like, this is cringe.
Some of the videos I've made have been very not edgy. I don't think they some of these videos were edgy. I think they were just outright cruel. So
that's great. I feel like even when we put IDubbbz in the title, we're like, hey, we're going to learn about it. Everyone in my chat was like, yeah, it was just edgy content. It's just edgy content, bro. 2016, edgy content. So for him to come out and say like, no, it wasn't edgy. It was cruel. And I'm a bad person for having done it, And
I'm really sorry that it's taken me this long to acknowledge it. I was morally grandstanding and acting as if I am any better than any of these people that I was making Content Cop videos on. And I'm not. I'm a human. I'm a real human. I don't think anyone deserves that level of cruelty or hate. It's also...
I don't necessarily know what the Content Cop videos were about, and chat told me I cannot watch them on Twitch because of the slurs. So I guess I'm going to assume he's right. But I do, in hearing that, you are always allowed to like critique, right? And sometimes even criticize. Now, it shouldn't go to the length of cruelty, but if Logan Paul puts out a video and he says X, Y, and Z, or if Andrew Tate puts out a video, I should be able to look at it with a critical eye. I don't have to be a perfect person to understand where like arguments fall apart or where there are like bad moral arguments.
I, kept making this hurtful content. I ended up pivoting it into other things.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because it gets views, right? I mean, as Kent was saying earlier, like if you put out this content and everyone on the platform is like, this is the best content, holy shit, we love it. And then the algorithm picks it up and all of a sudden you're getting like 1 million views, 2 million views. You're getting talked about by other people that you care about. It's really easy to get into that mindset. On a much lower level, this is how I feel about reacting a lot of the time. Not to this, because it's like something that's interesting culturally and everyone can have a take and I can pause a ton and we can talk about it. But like just watching TV shows and shit, it's just like, yeah, I feel insecure and I'm doing this thing.
It doesn't matter what my intentions are. Like if I'm hurting people, I'm hurting people. And who the fuck knows what my intentions are? Like it's
really crazy looking at this. I feel like everyone has this, right? We look back and cringe. And sometimes it's as simple as like, oh, someone waved and we waved back and they were waving to someone behind me and cringe. And then sometimes it's a little more aggressive of like, I can't believe I said words like this. We talk about words that were very common when I was in high school, pejorative words. And it's like, oh my God, I said them in Halo 2 on Xbox Live all the time and I feel terrible. Doing that in front of millions of people and having to own up to it is like mind-numbingly terrifying.
I just want to make it clear that I am absolutely responsible for my audience. If you want to, look out for people who are red flags, it's definitely people who had my mentality that say, I'm not responsible for what my audience does.
I completely agree. And there are so many fucking content creators out there that just leave that at the door. They like turn on, they go in their computer and they do their content and do this. And the second they're offline, they just like let the snowball go down the hill. You are absolutely responsible for your audience and what they're saying and doing and what's happening in different discords and stuff. You have to. No one else can be. You are the mother that birthed that audience, right? They are a reflection of you. It makes me sick to think of like what you guys might say and do in other channels. That's why I'm like very strict here, right?
I've profited off of this bigoted content for years, and I've made a successful career out of it. And that's not right. And I know that a lot more needs to be done to even approach a life that I would think would be like acceptable.
I want to make one thing like clear, and I think it's an extremely important point. It is very, very easy when you are rich, famous, people love you, to surround yourself with sycophants and say fuck off whenever people challenge like your ideas about yourself. IDubbbz could have very easily never addressed this for the rest of his life and been rich and happy. I mean, who knows if he's happy? And so the thought of doing this unprompted, I assume, is very cool. I think this is like what it means to be. I haven't seen his other content. Maybe it's like unforgivable from a content perspective, but I think this is a good thing to do from like a human perspective. I think we should always take stock of ourselves and like what makes us feel good and bad in relation to society and shit like that.
I'd like to unlist the videos so that people, can access them still for whatever, purposes they might want to do that for. But
I guess I'm not really sure what those purposes would be.
I feel like that's the best solution, at least for the time being. I'm sorry to everyone that I made content cop videos on. I still don't like the majority of you, and that's fine.
You're all pieces of shit, but I was too.
But I can recognize that you did not deserve the hate and harassment that I sent your way. I harassed Hannah in person and then harassed her online, and that's deplorable behavior. I'm also sorry to all the black viewers and minority groups who had to put up with that video and put up with, the phrases. I said either it's all okay or none of it's okay.
And really the ramifications. It's not only like the phrases. I think a lot of people aren't necessarily pearl clutching at like, oh, this guy said the word, but it's like the normalization of it. The fact that it got 1 million views and now other people are going to as well is just so frustrating.
The post-fight speech that I gave.
I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but I really do appreciate the support, and thank you for coming.
I will say, as someone who was in the audience at Creator Clash and knew nothing about IDubbbz besides the fact that like he had done cringe things, that felt weird to me because I was like, oh, like, is this icky? Am I supposed to like accept this? Is this an apology? It felt very fucking weird because people were like crying in the audience when he was doing that, and I was like, this is just boxing, isn't it?
Over the years that
Fucking
I
weirdos.
neglected and I left behind. The people whose feelings I, didn't take into consideration, those are the people who I was addressing as, I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea. Anyone who thinks that I should be shouting the N-word from the rooftops, I don't want to be your cup of tea. One year I was at a convention and a bunch of fans were, wanting pictures. And
real story is going to make this powerful.
This particular fan came up to me and said, I know you probably don't like transgender people, but can I, get a picture? That smacked me in the face. I was like, oh, holy shit. Why would you think that? but I mean, it was fairly obvious. I was
Yeah, you go back and watch your content and you're like, oh, this is how I portray myself on the internet.
being cruel, hateful, bigoted, and being very uncaring about people's feelings.
Men will literally release a 17-minute vlog about how they're shit instead of go to therapy. You know what I'm talking about? Ladies, this is what we deal with. I go to therapy. I understand. It's like, I'm glad that you're doing it this way, but man, you got a lot of demons, friend.
A very big thing that has sort of altered my view on all of this is just the amount of hate and harassment my wife Anissa has received over the years. She's had to deal with it from the beginning of our relationship, and I have done a horrible job at acknowledging her and her feelings for it. A lot of the time,
Wow.
I just thought that was her problem. That was
Jesus Christ, that's crazy. My community is like bullying my wife to the point of tears, and it's like, get good. That's
it's
wild.
not my problem that you're getting hate and harassment. And it's like, no, it absolutely is. You know, that's the culture that I
There's a
cultivate.
strong through line of responsibility in this video, which I think is cool. That's what I was trying to get to the core of earlier, which is like, we are responsible for our audiences elsewhere on the internet, but we're also really responsible for everything. And it's really corny to be like, influencers have power and there's a voice on the internet and cultural tastemakers. But yeah, exactly that. And I've spent so much time around people who have not abused that, a la Ludwig, that it's like, I forget that there's other people out there.
I'm still not perfect. I think that is, my empathy meter's only maybe like a quarter of the way filled up, but it's at least there. I guess as one final thing, I just want to thank everyone who's given me the space and the compassion to grow as a person. And I think most importantly, I appreciate my wife, Anissa. I love you. You're amazing. Right now you're streaming, but bon voyage, toodles.
Oh my God, I thought he was gonna kill his wife. I feel like that is a very weird way to end the video. He said, I love you, you're streaming. See ya, bitch. What? That was a great video. I don't know shit about him, but we watch a lot of influencer apology videos on this stream and on this YouTube channel. And most of them are eye-rollingly, offensively bad. And as someone who's thought a lot about influencer apologies, I think that this one was great. Should I watch this? Is it gonna make me feel bad, or like, I'm not trying to roast my homie.
IDubbbz posted a YouTube video that's become extremely divisive.
What if Charlie was one of the people that misses the old IDubbbz, you know?
I'm sorry to immediately come in here with the Phoenix Wright objection, but I completely disagree with the sentiment that it's weak or passive to change your content and expect people to see that as a reflection of yourself. That's pretty much the optimal way of handling any kind of situation in which you're not comfortable with either your audience or the content you've been making.
I feel like I'm kind of getting distracted because in my mind, I'm thinking like, I was making Pokemon content and I want to switch to making fucking Digimon content because I love the Digimon visual novel game. When this is more about like, yeah, I made a bunch of videos where I scream slurs at people. I do think it's important to address when something was so bad that it like makes you feel shame, right?
I don't think there's anything weak about just making different content and growing individually without having to come forward and share that growth with your audience.
I completely disagree with this point. Again, we have to keep in mind that this was like screaming slurs. We cannot just say that it is like doing this kind of content or this kind of content.
At the end of the day, your subscribers aren't your friends. You don't know them and they don't know you. That's the brass tacks of it. Sorry to blast the cold water in your face.
And I actually think this is really important and so true. They are not your friends. They don't know you. And that means they don't know your heart, right? They don't know what you actually stand for. And so if you have a bunch of videos where you like do things that are racist or do things that are bigoted, and then all of a sudden you don't do those videos anymore, but you also don't address it, people are still going to come to the meetup and assume you're a transphobe, like happened to him. He addresses it specifically in his video, IDubbbz that is. To play devil's advocate, I do think there is something in Charlie's point here that says like you don't technically owe anyone anything. And if you don't feel bad about the thing you did, you do not have to address it. You can just make other content. But I think it's very obvious that IDubbbz felt bad. He felt shame. And so it was important to him to share it. He's not saying, Charlie is not saying not to apologize. He was, and that's where I think a lot of this like content creators watching videos on the internet and like points getting taken out of context. He was addressing the fact that IDubbbz said it was weak to not address it. Charlie's not saying that like you shouldn't address it or that you should address it. He's saying that one is not like better than the other. One is not like morally more valuable than the other. Now, me and him disagree on that, but that's kind of the point he's arguing.
The way he talks about this content makes it sound like he used to fucking murder puppies for these videos, which it was never that extreme.
This is an area where I'm not going to be able to add much context because I didn't watch IDubbbz videos, so...
much would consider it edgy. It was 2016 edginess.
Whenever I hear 2016, it's like we talked about in the intro. That was not that long ago. Maybe I'm getting old. 2016? This is post-Obama, dude.
Like, they're not hurtful, nor do I really think they're damaging. Now, you could make an argument that they were hurtful to the people they were about, but at the end of the day, I don't think the goal of his content was ever to be hurtful or damaging. He was just trying to entertain and using edginess as shock humor, which for its time was acceptable online. Now, whether or not you think that's okay that it was ever acceptable, that's a different argument for a different day. But the point is, the point of his content wasn't to be hateful or hurtful. He really was just trying to entertain. At least that's how I and the majority of people viewed it. So I just don't think the apology is really warranted. But to think that it is this huge, massive problem, like you made an unforgivable mistake, is a little weird to me.
Maybe Charlie is like reading different takes on the internet. And again, I'm new to this, but to me, like, he made the apology video and it is very forgivable. I think there is a large like online part of the community or part of the online community that is forgiving him, that is actually like taking pride in the thought that someone would look back and say that like what I did was unacceptable, right?
You shouldn't have to apologize for criticizing someone or something.
Now, I brought that up in mine as well. I completely agree. You shouldn't have to apologize for criticizing. I think it's apologizing for like the actual content you did or the way that you criticized.
To try and vilify the idea of criticism being evil, I think is a little dangerous because then you just create these echo chambers and no one ever really grows from that.
From my perspective, the fact that he made that video, the fact that he is addressing these things, and I would posit that's like the purest form of growth, right? Maybe doing it not on the internet. No, it's important they did it on the internet so people know. I love it. He's growing like a fucking mighty oak over here.
Casual racism is still racism. Casual bigotry is still bigotry.
I wish I could hold everyone's eyes open like fucking Clockwork Orange and play this 5 seconds on repeat for the rest of their lives.
And, you know, I said a lot of things.
What do you mean? But it's comedy.
That
No.
I look back at and I cringe now and I'm like, that is an awful thing to say.
This I completely understand. That is totally normal to look back on that and cringe, right? In your 30s and really any age over 16, you're not exactly going to be getting a hearty ho 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 belly laugh just hearing a bunch of slurs being spammed. Real life isn't Call of Duty lobbies. I don't think many people in the real world are going to be like...
Real life isn't Call of Duty lobbies. And Call of Duty lobbies shouldn't be Call of Duty lobbies, I think is the kind of further line in the sand I would like to draw. This shouldn't just be like kids will be kids, boys will be boys. This is just the way of the world. We can try and make things better.
I feel like this whole video could have just been summed up very easily like, hey guys, it was fucking 2016. I was edgy, and now I think it's cringy, so I don't want to do that anymore, and we're closing the book. That, you know, we're shutting...
Why not go further? That would be my question. That would be my response. Like, why not talk about it? If we think that, like, hey, it was 2016, it was edgy humor, and now it's not okay, why isn't it okay? Why are we distancing ourselves from edgy humor in the first place? Because right now everyone's just saying like that was edgy humor and now edgy humor is out. But the important thing is to take our magnifying glass and say, why is edgy humor out? And it's because we Scooby-Doo unmasked edgy humor and it was like, oh, that was just racism and sexism and bigotry and ableism. And honestly, that's not very funny. That's the important part, right?
Like, you weren't a bad person if you were laughing at his content cops or anything like that. And I don't think he was a bad person.
I would agree with that, and I think that IDubbbz would agree. I think most people would agree with that, right? You weren't a bad person. Without giving too much credence to like, it was 2016 line, it's like, yeah, it was a lot more normalized, which is bad, but it was.
And that's really it. I just don't think it goes too much deeper than that. Like I said, I have no doubt there really were some dangerous weirdos that did hold dangerous beliefs in his community. But I don't think he made them. I think they were there when they found his content to begin with, and they stuck around because they just liked hearing the edgy words spoken out loud.
That is a very, 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 very generous take, right, to IDubbbz? Like the idea that we are not, especially as children, our content doesn't form like our opinions on things, right? And you have to assume that most people watching IDubbbz were children or like young people. And it's like, no. Those 11-year-olds, they were already racist, right? It seems absurd when you say it that way. That 9-year-old, racist as hell.
So I'll always respect the creators that choose the harder path here of pivoting and changing their content, doing what makes them happier, even if it means taking that huge risk of losing the audience you've built up over time. Even though I disagree with IDubbbz.
What the fuck? I just heard 20 minutes of what I assumed to be the opposite.
Perspective on his older content being damaging or dangerous or indoctrinating. I still do respect that he didn't like what he was doing, so now he's doing something that he likes more. Even though it is coming at the risk of losing his audience, he'll find happiness in the content that he makes going forward, and maybe he's happier with the new audience that he potentially cultivates through all of it. So, but yeah, anyway, just kind of wanted to talk about this whole situation. That's about it. So, yeah.
Interesting. Very, very, very interesting. I think it would be hard for me to disagree more with not only the argument that Charlie made, but with the entire ethos around it, that content is like a separate pillar and it should not be involved in like our everyday life and the formative experiences that specifically young people go through when they interact with it. Maybe it happened because like starting as a content creator 15 years ago is different than starting as a content creator now, but you are responsible for your content. You're responsible for what your content teaches people, in my opinion, and some people can disagree with this. And I think it is hugely impactful as a content creator to speak out when you feel like you have done something bad, when you feel like your content has taken on a mind of its own, when you feel like your community thinks something that is not true to who you are as a human being. And discounting it to like, oh, it was just a different generation, a different genre. I think we should talk about our growth because it creates moments for our content to actually speak for the real us. This is going to be a weird video, having watched both the source material, Charlie's response, and then Charlie's response. Let's see how it goes.
After my latest video on the IDubbbz situation, it's being hailed as a big L take from old Charlie.
Chat, does he double down or does he back off?
I gave my opinion on the IDubbbz apology video, same thing every single person in the world with a keyboard has done over the last 24 hours, and this isn't
That's me!
People have done some very uncharitable interpretations of what I've been saying, and I guess I can't really blame.
It does suck when someone, takes you out of context. Hopefully I didn't do that when I was responding to the video, but
if I'm not abundantly clear with where I stand on things, I've learned that everything gets lost with ambiguity, and people run with the absolute most negative narrative they can find.
Which is basically what IDubbbz said, right? Let's make ourselves unequivocally clear.
You're not like a little ghost or a spirit over my shoulder that's watching me make a video or in my little noodle up here when I'm delivering my thoughts. which means it's my responsibility to make my intentions known.
The irony is kind of funny. To be clear, Charlie, we said, or we don't believe, Charlie wasn't attacking anyone. I think he was saying like he didn't have to do it this way. And he was attacking the idea that it's weak to not do it that way, which is two completely different things.
I really feel like throughout the video I made it clear that the edgy shit is lame and cringy.
He made it
Absolutely
very
regret.
clear it was
Obviously,
cringe.
the point of my video was never to attack the idea that someone growing and regretting things they've done in their past is a bad thing. I really thought I made that clear, but I must have missed the mark since so many people are saying that the whole core component of my video is to attack the fact that he's apologizing for personal growth and doing things that make him happy.
Yeah, I think it was just the double down, because it was never like it's completely normal to regret. It was always like it's completely normal to regret and you don't have to apologize. It's completely normal to regret that cringy stuff, but just make new content, right? Where I think everyone else is like, wait, why is that the discussion around it? Like, we should have a discussion about what IDubbbz was talking about, right?
When I'm saying I don't think the apology was warranted, I'm saying I don't think him being a product of edgy internet culture is necessarily something that should have been weighing on his mind so heavily for the last fucking 7 years.
Oh, interesting. We don't get to decide what weighs on his brain. We can't say that like, oh, you shouldn't feel bad about this. It's like, wait, he feels bad about it, so he apologized. That part has to be sacred, like this person's feelings on it, right?
The way he talked about in this video really made me feel very bad for him, that he's had this kind of...
That's empathy too. Like, I feel bad for him as well. I didn't even watch the videos.
His channel wasn't the genesis of edginess.
That also, just because it wasn't just him doesn't mean he shouldn't feel bad if he does, and doesn't mean that it's okay that he did it, right? Just because everyone's doing something doesn't mean like, oh yeah, it's totally fine.
After listening to what people have said since I posted my video and diving a bit more into like the actual discussion in general online, I failed to really understand that maybe IDubbbz also treated this video like a diary where he just wanted to get everything off his chest with how he feels about it. So I completely misunderstood what the motivation could have been for this video, and for that, I'm sorry.
I think it's almost like the YouTuber who cried canceled, right? Like, you assume that when someone makes an apology, it was forced at the hands of a woke mob, when it's like, oh, wait, people can just apologize. It doesn't have to be forced. It's so funny that his mind immediately went to like, oh yeah, the community forced him to, which sometimes happens, I guess.
Wasn't to attack the whole idea of an apology for content you regret. That was never my intention.
Good take.
This is truly like a very personal thing where he wants to just finally move on from this, and in order to do that, he wanted to make this video publicly addressing how he feels about all of it. Then that's totally understandable. That's absolutely understandable. And I may have had like the wrong lens of viewing the video in the first place.
Yeah, if you're viewing it through the lens of like the internet forced him to make this and they won't stop like harassing him, it's very easy to see how you could have Charlie's take.
In the last video, I mentioned that I didn't feel his content created the weirdo losers that disregard the message of the content and instead focused on just the slurs, right? Like a bunch of like actual bad actors who are just there to celebrate the fact that IDubbbz would say the bad words, the real off-limits stuff, the slurs. That's all they cared about. I said I have no doubt that those community members exist, but I didn't think his content created them. You know, I felt like, you know, like bacteria, they just happened to already be there and then found his content and then found a home there to keep celebrating that shit. But just like I mentioned a little while ago, I'm most likely wrong about this. I saw the content when I was in my 20s. I could see the satire in it. I assume the majority of other people could, but I didn't even take into consideration that a lot of the viewers were younger, and there's a very good chance that this content was their first exposure to it, and it may have led to them becoming those weirdo losers.
Broad definition of satire, but like, hey, I respect that he was like looking through it from the lens of when he watched it at his age, and like it could be very different from for children. And I think it's very obviously different for children. It's not that it can be different, it is.
I think that was most of the things people were talking about in relation to my video on the subject, so hopefully I cleared up any misconceptions about where I stand or what I believe. And I'm sorry if things got real lost somehow. I want to make it clear once again, I was never attacking IDubbbz for apologizing for regretting his content or for wanting to change and grow and do different things. I really thought I voiced support for those things, but I must not have done it effectively. So that's on me, and hopefully this gave all of my perspectives on it much more clarity. That's about it. See ya.
Yeah, I think that was a much better second video. I think there was still an odd reluctance around understanding that content can be harmful, right? And maybe I'm just like, maybe I'm cut from a different cloth. Maybe I'm like, am not internet native like some people, where like for me, I look at it and I go like, oh yeah, that was bad. Like I think I wish that didn't exist. And maybe that's unfair to IDubbbz or to who he was as a person at the time and to like what the content meant for people. But for me, I'm like, yeah, that seems pretty bad.